Picture this scenario, because I can almost guarantee you're living it right now, or you know someone who is. Sarah and Michael, both 34. Sarah's a project manager at a mid-sized tech company pulling in $68,000 a year. Michael works in pharmaceutical sales, making $72,000. Combined household income, $140,000. That puts them comfortably in the top 20% of American earners. They should be crushing it financially. They should have a growing investment portfolio, a healthy emergency fund, taking family vacations without guilt, maybe even thinking about early retirement. Instead, they're terrified. Last month, Sarah's company announced layoffs. Nothing's happened yet, but the anxiety is eating her alive. Because she knows, they both know, that if either one of them loses their job, they have maybe 8 weeks before the entire financial structure of their lives collapses. The mortgage payment doesn't get made, the daycare gets pulled, the car gets repossessed. Everything they've built for the last decade evaporates. They're making $140,000 a year, and they're living like they're one bad Tuesday away from financial catastrophe. And here's the craziest part. They did everything right. They got the degrees, they landed the good jobs, they bought the house in the good school district, they combined their incomes like every financial advisor told them to do. So why does financial security feel like an illusion they're desperately pretending to believe in? If you've ever looked at your combined household income and thought, we make too much money to feel this scared, or if you lie awake at night knowing that your financial safety is contingent on absolutely nothing going wrong ever, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Because today, we're going to dismantle one of the most dangerous myths in modern personal finance, the idea that 2 incomes make you twice as secure. Here's the thing about dual incomes that most financial advice completely misses. We've been sold this beautiful mathematical story. It goes like this. If one income of $70,000 can support a family, then 2 incomes of $70,000 each should support that same family and provide $70,000 of surplus for savings, investments, and building real wealth. That's just basic addition. 2 is better than 1. More money equals more security. Except that's not what happened. That's not what happens to anyone. What actually happened is one of the most well-documented financial traps in modern economics, and almost nobody talks about it outside of academic circles. There's a term for this phenomenon. It's called the 2-income trap, and it was coined by Elizabeth Warren, yes, that Elizabeth Warren, back in 2003 when she was still a Harvard bankruptcy law professor, long before she became a senator. She and her daughter, Amelia Warren Tyagi, wrote an entire book about this after studying over 2,000 families who had filed for bankruptcy. And what they found was genuinely shocking. Having 2 incomes didn't make families more financially secure. It made them more vulnerable. It made them more fragile. Families with 2 working parents were actually more likely to file for bankruptcy than single-income families were a generation earlier. Let that sink in for a second. Working twice as hard, bringing home 2 paychecks, doing everything the modern economy tells you to do, and you end up more likely to lose everything, not less. The basic idea of the 2-income trap is devastatingly simple. When families started sending both parents into the workforce, they didn't bank the second income. They spent it. But they didn't spend it on luxuries. They spent it on the new baseline costs of middle-class life, housing in good school districts, childcare, healthcare, transportation. And once those fixed costs expanded to consume both incomes, families lost something critical that single-income families of the past had: a backup plan. Let me show you exactly what I mean with a real example from Warren's research. In 1973, a typical single-income family, let's say the dad worked and the mom stayed home, earned about $46,000 in today's inflation-adjusted dollars. The median home in a decent school district cost about $170,000 in today's money. They spent roughly 25% of that single income on their mortgage. They had 1 car, basic health care, public schools, and critically, they had margin. They had breathing room. And if something went wrong, if the breadwinner got sick or lost their job, the stay-at-home parent could enter the workforce. That second potential income was an insurance policy, an emergency reserve that could be activated if needed. Now, fast forward to today. That same family, both parents working, combined income of $75,000. Sounds like more money, right? But the median home in a decent school district now costs $420,000. They're spending 40 or more of their combined income just on housing. Add mandatory dual car ownership because both parents commute. Add $15,000 a year per child for daycare because nobody's home. Add skyrocketing health insurance premiums. The two-income family doesn't have double the financial security of the single-income family from 1973. They have less because their fixed costs have expanded to consume both incomes, and they've already burned their backup plan just to afford the baseline middle-class lifestyle. Most people look at a dual-income household and see the gross numbers. They see $140,000 combined and think that's a lot of money. But nobody calculates what I call the real net security, what's actually left after you account for the hidden costs of having two incomes and the catastrophic fragility it creates. Let's do the brutal math that most families never do. Let's take Sarah and Michael from our opening story. $140,000 combined. Here's what actually happens to that money. First, taxes. Because of progressive tax brackets, you're looking at roughly 30% effective rate when you combine federal, state, and payroll taxes. So that $140,000 immediately becomes $98,000 in take-home pay. But here's where it gets interesting. Let's focus specifically on what that second income actually contributes, Michael's $72,000 salary. Because of how tax brackets work, that second income gets taxed at a higher marginal rate than if it were the only income. After taxes, Michael's $72,000 becomes about $48,000 in actual take-home. Now let's subtract the costs that exist specifically because Michael works. Childcare for their two kids. $30,000 per year. And yes, that's real. The average cost of daycare in America is $15,000 per child annually. In high-cost areas, it's $25,000. Michael's $48,000 is now $18,000. Commuting costs. Michael drives 35 minutes each way to work. Gas, insurance, maintenance, depreciation on a car that exists primarily to get him to the job. Conservative estimate? $6,000 per year. Michael's $48,000 is now $12,000. But here's the category that most people completely ignore: exhaustion expenses. Two working parents means nobody has time or energy for meal prep, home maintenance, or domestic labor, so you're paying for convenience. Meal delivery 3 times a week instead of cooking, house cleaning twice a month, lawn care, the premium you pay for grab-and-go food at the grocery store instead of cooking from scratch, oil changes at the dealership instead of doing it yourself because who has time? Conservative estimate for a dual-income household, $8,000 per year more than a household where one person has time to manage these things. Michael's $48,000 is now $4,000. That's not a typo. Michael works full-time. He's away from his kids 50 hours a week when you include commute and lunch. He deals with office politics and performance reviews, and the stress of knowing his family's survival depends on him keeping this job. And the net contribution to the household, after all the costs of him working, is $4,000 per year. That's $333 a month. That's $77 per week. That's $11 per workday. That's $1.37 per hour when you account for the actual time committed to the job. Michael is selling his life for $1.37 an hour. Now here's where the illusion becomes dangerous, because when Sarah and Michael look at their tax return, they see $140,000. They feel like they make good money. They make decisions based on that number. They buy the house that two incomes can qualify for. They take on car payments that two incomes can theoretically support. The bank looks at their combined income and says, yes, you can afford this $450,000 mortgage. And technically, they can, as long as both incomes keep flowing, as long as neither of them gets sick, as long as neither gets laid off, as long as neither burns out, as long as they don't have another kid, as long as their parents don't need care, as long as nothing unexpected happens. But here's what actually happened. According to a 2019 study by the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of American adults, including many in dual-income households making 6 figures, couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing or selling something. Think about that. Families making $100,000, $140,000, $180,000 a year, and they're one transmission repair away from a financial crisis. This isn't because they're irresponsible. This is because they've built a life that requires both incomes at 100% capacity with zero margin for error. Let me show you how the trap snaps shut with another example. David and Jennifer. Combined income, $155,000. Sounds even better, right? They bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a great school district, $520,000, monthly payment with taxes and insurance, $3,800. They can afford it. Barely. It takes about 50% of their net income, but they can make it work. Then Jennifer's company does a reorganization. She doesn't lose her job, but her hours get cut by 20%. Her income drops from $75,000 to $60,000. That's $15,000 less per year, about $1,000 less per month after taxes. Suddenly, the mortgage that was tight but manageable becomes impossible. They can't downsize because they're locked into the house. Selling would cost tens of thousands of dollars in realtor fees and closing costs, and they don't have the liquidity. They can't move to a cheaper area because then David's commute becomes unmanageable, and his job is the one keeping them afloat. They're trapped. The house that was supposed to be an asset has become an anchor. The dual income that was supposed to provide security has created catastrophic fragility. Now let me show you the historical contrast, because this is where it gets really dark. A 2020 analysis by the Pew Research Center compared family finances from 1970 to today, adjusted for inflation. They found that median household income has increased by about 25% since 1970. Sounds good, right? We're making more money. But during that same period, housing costs in good school districts have increased by 120%. Healthcare costs per household are up 180%. Childcare, which barely existed as a category in 1970 because someone was usually home, now costs the average family $11,000 to $16,000 per child annually. In high-cost areas, it's $25,000. The single-income family of 1970 had more discretionary income as a percentage of their budget than the dual-income family of today. They had more savings as a percentage of income, and most critically, they had the backup plan still in reserve. But here's where most people mess up when they think about this. They think the solution is just to make more money. If we could just get to $200,000 combined, then we'd finally be comfortable, then we'd finally have breathing room. But the trap scales with income. A 2022 survey by PYMTS found that 36% of households making over $200,000 per year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Let me say that again. Families making over $200,000, putting them roughly in the top 10% of earners, feel financially stressed on a monthly basis. This isn't a poverty problem. This is a structural problem. When both incomes become mandatory just to maintain your baseline lifestyle, you don't have two incomes anymore. You have two jobs that you can never quit. Now here's the part that will really blow your mind, because most dual-income families think they're building wealth because their net worth goes up over time. The house appreciates, the 401k grows, but they're confusing wealth with leverage.
If you need both incomes to service the debt on your appreciating house, you don't own an asset. The bank owns an asset, and you're the person paying for it. If losing one income means you have to liquidate your retirement accounts just to survive 6 months, those aren't savings. That's deferred consumption that you're one catastrophe away from having to spend. Real wealth isn't about how much you own. It's about how long you can survive if the income stops. And for most dual-income families, that number is terrifyingly close to zero. This is where I get genuinely frustrated, because this isn't just bad luck, and it's not because families are irresponsible with money. This is a systemic trap, and it was created deliberately by the way housing markets, school funding, and labor markets evolved. Let me show you how this happened. In the 1970s, when women entered the workforce in large numbers, which was a good thing, let's be clear, families suddenly had dual incomes. What do you think happened to housing prices? They got bid up, way up. If most families competing for houses in good school districts have one income, prices stabilize around what one income can afford. But when most families suddenly have two incomes, everyone has twice the purchasing power for the same limited supply of houses in good school districts. It became an arms race. Families started bidding up property values in good school districts using both incomes as ammunition. And once enough families did this, you needed two incomes just to afford what one income used to buy. The dual income didn't give you an advantage, it became the baseline requirement. This is what Warren calls the bidding war for educational opportunity. You're not paying extra for a bigger house or more land, you're paying a premium for access to good public schools that are funded by property taxes. The price of entry to decent public education became a $450,000 mortgage instead of a $200,000 mortgage. You're paying tuition in the form of inflated housing costs. And here's the evil part. The system relies on you not doing this math. Banks make billions in mortgage interest by qualifying families based on combined income, knowing full well that those families have zero margin for error. If you default, they foreclose and sell your house to the next dual-income family. They literally cannot lose. Employers love this too. When both partners in a household must work to survive, employees have zero negotiating power. You can't risk getting fired to demand better conditions or higher pay. You can't take a career risk because your family's survival depends on both paychecks flowing uninterrupted. You become the most compliant, desperate worker imaginable. The financial advice industrial complex has a vested interest in keeping you on this hamster wheel. They want you focused on increasing income, not reducing dependence on income. Because if you ever stopped and realized that the goal isn't to make more money, but to need less money, you might stop consuming their products. Most people don't realize this, but the dual income trap creates a category of people I call the high-income poor. Families making $150,000, $200,000, even $250,000, who have less financial freedom than a single-income family making $60,000 in 1975. They have bigger numbers, nicer stuff, and infinitely more fragility. You're not broken for feeling scared despite making good money. You're human. But the system is designed to keep you too exhausted to question it. They rely on you being too busy working both jobs to do the math on whether those jobs are actually making you more secure.
So what do you actually do with this information? How do you escape a trap that seems to have already closed? The answer is not quit your job tomorrow and live off-grid in a van. We have to be realistic. We have bills. We have kids in schools. We have lives. But we can architect our way out of fragility even if we can't immediately escape the dual income reality. Here's the mindset shift that changes everything. Stop optimizing for maximum income and start optimizing for minimum dependency. Strategy 1, the one income foundation. This is the most powerful defensive move you can make. It goes like this. Structure your fixed costs, your non-negotiable monthly expenses, so they can be covered by one income alone. Not comfortably, not with vacations and dinners out, but survivably. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. If your combined take-home is $8,000 per month, most families would take on a mortgage and lifestyle that requires $7,000 to $7,500 of that to function. They're operating at 90 to 95% capacity. Instead, cap your fixed costs at what the lower earner brings home. If that's $3,500 per month, your rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance, minimum food and utilities need to fit within that number. That means you're buying a house that one income can afford, not a house that two incomes can qualify for. This requires sacrifice in the short term. It means driving past houses you could technically afford. It means explaining to friends why you're not upgrading even though you got a raise. But here's the payoff. The higher earner's income becomes entirely discretionary. That's when the magic happens. That second income, or the majority of it, goes straight into building an escape fund. Emergency savings first, then aggressive debt payoff, then investments that generate passive income. You're using the dual income period to build yourself out of needing dual income. Within 5 years of this approach, something powerful happens. The money you invested starts generating its own returns, and suddenly you have what you thought dual incomes would give you in the first place, actual financial security. Strategy 2, the backup plan budget. Even if you can't immediately restructure your fixed costs, you can prepare for the scenario everyone's afraid of. Create what I call a backup plan budget. Sit down this weekend and answer this question. If one income disappeared tomorrow, what would we cut immediately to survive? Not thrive, survive. Be specific. Which streaming services go? Do we pull the kids from private activities? Do we trade the new car for an old one? Do we take in a roommate? Write it all down. Calculate the exact monthly number. Most people avoid this exercise because it's terrifying, but knowing the number makes it less terrifying. If you know you can survive on $4,000 a month and you're currently spending $7,000, you have a plan. You have agency. You're no longer helplessly fragile. Strategy 3, the nuclear option. But it works. Sometimes the only way to escape the trap is to deliberately downgrade a major fixed cost to create breathing room. Sell the house in the expensive school district and rent in a slightly less prestigious area. Yeah, the schools might be a 7 instead of a 9, but you just freed up $1,500 a month and eliminated the catastrophic risk of foreclosure. Trade the financed car for a paid-off older model. You just eliminated a $450 monthly payment that was quietly strangling you. I know this feels like failure. It feels like moving backwards. But here's the truth. Downgrading your lifestyle to secure your freedom isn't failure. It's liberation. You're choosing optionality over appearances. Strategy 4, the skill hedge. Even if both people in a household need to work, you can reduce fragility by making sure both people have marketable skills in different industries. If you're both in tech and tech implodes, you're both unemployed simultaneously. That's maximum fragility. But if one person is in healthcare and one is in education, an economic downturn affects you asymmetrically. One income might dip while the other holds. You have diversification. And critically, invest in skills that can generate income flexibly. Sarah, the project manager, might also learn bookkeeping or freelance writing, skills that could generate $2,000 a month from home if her main job disappears. That $2,000 a month buys you time to find the next full-time role instead of taking the first desperate offer. Look, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you this is easy or that it's fair. The system is rigged against you. It takes exponentially more effort to escape when you're already in the trap than it would have taken to avoid it in the first place. The game is designed to keep you running on the hamster wheel until you collapse. But here's the thing. The families who escape aren't the ones who make the most money. They're the ones who refuse to let their fixed costs expand to consume their income. They're the ones who kept their backup plan in reserve instead of deploying it as the default operating mode. They're the ones who realized the illusion of security is more dangerous than the honest acknowledgement of fragility. You can't earn your way out of a trap you don't even know you're in. Now you know. The question isn't whether you make enough money. The question is whether you're building a life that could survive if the money stopped. Two incomes don't make you twice as secure. They make you twice as dependent. Real security isn't about how much money flows through your bank account. It's about how little you need to survive and how long you could last if it stopped flowing tomorrow. If this video made you see your finances differently, share it with a friend who's terrified despite making good money. We don't talk about this stuff enough. We show off the wins, but we never talk about the fragility hiding underneath. Hit that like button, subscribe for more content that challenges the conventional wisdom that's keeping you broke, and I'll see you in the next one.